Don Wooden's 7 principles, Dale Carnegie's 5 fundamentals, 5 elements of essentialism, 7 principles of thriving on chaos, and less social media standards. All the people telling me to do this and do that. We can't do all this. I just give up. You know what? We can't do it all, but I can tell you how to process what is important to you. And it all starts with a saying my mother used to say. She would say, "It spoke to me." So pull up a comfortable chair, grab your favorite beverage, and let's get started. Have you ever heard someone say something, a phrase, an idea, concept, and something in you just stopped? Not because it was loud, not because it was complicated, or even because it came from some expert on stage, but because it landed somewhere deep, somewhere quiet, and your whole internal world said, "That's it. That's the thing." Maybe it was a line from a book. It could have been a conversation over coffee that you couldn't shake, a quote somebody posted that you would normally scroll past, but this time you stopped. We call it all kinds of things. We call it an epiphany, or even a gut feeling, a moment of clarity, a download. But there's a phrase that captures it perfectly, and it spoke to me. And today, that's what we're exploring. What it means when something speaks to you, why some ideas resonate and others don't, even when they're coming from the same source. And what happens when you learn to listen to those moments instead of dismissing them? Now, what does "it spoke to me" really mean? Let's start with the phrase itself, because it's interesting that we use the word spoke. We didn't say "it made sense to me," not "I intellectually agreed," not "the data checked out." Spoke, like there was a voice, like something external or maybe deeply internal was communicating. Think about that for a second. When you say something spoke to you, you're describing a two-way moment. You received something. There was a transmission. And here's what I find fascinating. Resonance is not always about logic. You can read 10 books on leadership, nod all along every chapter, take the notes, do the exercise, and walk away unmoved. And then someone at a conference says one sentence casually, off the cuff, and it rewires something in you. Now let's define resonance. It's a quality of evoking response, the reinforcement or prolongation of sound or an idea by reflection or vibration. In human experience, when something amplifies rather than just informs. You probably experienced this in business. An idea for a product you couldn't stop thinking about. A niche that just felt just right before you had any data to support it. Partnership or a hire where before contract, something you already said yes, or maybe the opposite. A deal that looked perfect on paper. Something in your gut said, don't do it. That's not mysticism. That's information. And we're going to talk about what it is, where it comes from, and how to use it. Now, here's why certain ideas land and others don't. Malcolm Gladwell in Blink talks about, he calls this thin slicing. It's the brain's ability to find patterns and make decisions in seconds using a fraction of the available information. Neuroscientists call this heuristic processing. Your brain is constantly pattern matching, comparing what's in front of you to everything you've ever experienced, felt, observed, and even survived. When something speaks to you, it's often your subconscious pattern library saying, "This fits. This matters. Hey, pay attention." Viktor Frankl describes something similar in logotherapy. He believed that the deepest human drive isn't pleasure or power, it's meaning. Now, let me repeat that. The deepest human drive isn't pleasure or power, it's meaning. And when we encounter the idea that aligns with our deepest sense of meaning, something in us responds. It resonates. Carl Jung called this individuation, process by which we become who we truly are. One of the primary mechanisms paying attention to what rises in you, what moves you, what you can't ignore. Think about a mentor, a book, or a moment that changed your trajectory. Now ask yourself, why that person? Why that particular book? Why that moment and not the hundreds before it? What was different about your readiness to receive it? There's something called personal relevance theory in cognitive psychology. Ideas stick when they connect to what you already care about, already believe, or actively wrestling with. The timing of resonance matters, which is why the same sermon can land differently depending on where you are in life. Same business principle reads different when you're struggling versus thriving. You were available to hear it. Now, I want to bring this to a different level because for those of us who operate from a faith perspective, it spoke to me takes on an additional meaning. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 13, it says, "For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure." That's just not a feel-good verse. That's a theological statement about the origin of our desires. The things that stir us, the visions that wake us up at 3 a.m., the ideas that won't leave us alone. They're not random. Now, in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9, it says, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." So what does it look like when something speaks to you from a spiritual framework? It's more like a nudge. It's a persistent pull, a peace that doesn't fully make sense given your circumstances. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 tells us to trust the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding. But notice, that's not the same as ignoring your instinct. It's about aligning your instinct with wisdom. There's a difference between impulse and discernment. Impulse is reactionary. It's loud. It's urgent, often driven by fear or desire. Discernment, it's much quieter. It persists. It stands up to time and prayer and wise counsel. When something speaks to you in that sustained, settled way, that's worth taking seriously. Think about the calls we get in business, a new direction, a pivot, a person who enters your world at just the right time. How much of your best professional stories started with a moment that felt like more than a coincidence? Not every nudge is divine, but you rarely forget the times you paused long enough to ask, is this from me? Or is this for me? Let's bring this into the business world, into negotiation table or the hiring decision. Jeff Bezos talks about regret minimization, projecting himself to age 80 and asking which decisions he'd regret. That framework is built on something resonating deeply, not just projecting return on investment. Steve Jobs famously trusted his aesthetic instinct over market research. Oprah built an entire empire on what she calls her inner GPS. They weren't reckless, they were calibrated. High performing entrepreneurs often describe a consistent thread. The ideas and opportunities that worked weren't always the safest or most logical. They're the ones they couldn't stop thinking about. Persistence of resonance is itself a data point. Let me give you 3 scenarios where this matters. Scenario 1, the idea that won't leave you alone. You pitched it to yourself 20 times. You've talked yourself out of it. You've done the math on why it's not the right time, and it's still there. That persistence is data. A bad idea doesn't haunt you, it fades. A resonant one returns. Second example, the hire or partner who just feels right. That person didn't have the best resume in the stack, but something in that conversation, the way they thought out loud or the way they approached a hard question landed differently. Don't miss that. Your brain was pattern matching against every leader, teammate, and collaborator you've ever known. Example number 3, the opportunity that doesn't add up, but feels like yes. You can't fully explain why. The margins aren't great yet. Timing isn't perfect. Something in you says, this is the table I'm supposed to be at. This is the season I'm supposed to move. That's not the delusion. That may be the vision. Intuition is not the absence of evidence. It's the compression of experience into a single feeling. Now, this is important. Not everything speaks to you deserves the yes. This episode isn't a permission slip for every impulse. So, how do you know the difference between genuine intuitive resonance and confirmation bias, between discernment and wishful thinking? Now, here's a discernment checklist. First, run the resonance through these filters before you act. Does it persist? Real resonance survives sleep, time, and sober reevaluation. Does it align with your values? Or does it ask you to compromise them? What does wise counsel say? Bring it to a trusted advisor, mentor, or spiritual director. Resonance that can't survive scrutiny may be reaction, not revelation. Is it rooted in fear or in faith? Fear-based resonance sounds like urgency. Faith-based resonance sounds like subtleness. Can you articulate why, even partially? Intuition should have some shape to it. If it's purely emotional with zero logic, slow down. The goal isn't to overanalyze everything that moves you. The goal is to develop what the ancient writers call wisdom, the ability to discern good from better, the opportunity from distraction, the divine nudge from the human desire. In Philippians chapter 1, verse 9, it says, "And it is my prayer that your love may abound more and more with the knowledge and all discernment." Now, here's your challenge this week, and it's simple, maybe uncomfortably simple. Have one conversation this week with the sole intention of listening for resonance, not to network, not to extract information, not to figure out how this person can help you. Just listen and notice what lands. Find someone this week, a mentor, a colleague, someone you've been meaning to reconnect with. And go in with one question. What's speaking to you right now? Then listen. Really listen. Notice, and their answer stops you. That is your signal. Because here's the thing about resonance. It's not just about the ideas finding you. It's about you becoming the kind of person who can actually hear them. The noise of business, urgency, deadlines, and comparison can drown out any signal. Part of doing this work, the internal work, is tuning your receiver. Can't hear what speaks to you if you never stop long enough to listen. So let's go back to all the different type of podcasts I had, from John Wooden and the Seven Principles to Essentialism to Thriving on Chaos, all the different possibilities and techniques going through there. It's not intended to basically think that you have to do them all to be successful, but more to create information and to get you something that speaks to you. Maybe out of those seven principles, two of them resonate with you. Well, those are the two you should be focusing on, or even the one. This is not an all or nothing. This is steps, one step at a time. Keep improving, keep evolving, keep learning. So that's a wrap on today's episode of Mind Your Business. And if something in this episode spoke to you, and I mean literally, I want to hear about it. Drop me a message, leave a review, share this with a person who needs it, because resonance is generous. When it lands on you, it's usually meant to move through you. And until next time, stay grounded, stay hungry, and stay tuned for what's actually speaking to you. And of course, keep your mindset strong.